Good afternoon. My name is Representative Debra Tendrich. I represent District 89 in Palm Beach County. Today, I am both excited and proud to stand here and announce that I'm pushing forward a bill alongside Senator Tom Wright and Representative Gonzalez Pittman. This bill calls for the great state of Florida to put the health of Floridians first by creating more transparency in our food supply. I'm introducing House Bill 641 that will require warning labels to be placed on the front of food and drink packages that contain synthetic dyes. These dyes are everywhere. They are used to make products look brighter, more colorful, and more appealing. But the truth is, they serve no real purpose other than to make food look pretty. What's worse is that these synthetic dyes come with a dangerous cost. Research has shown that they can lead to serious health problems like hyperactivity in children, allergic reactions, which lead to higher healthcare costs, and over-medicating our children. To bring this closer to home, let's talk about the children in Florida. The Florida Department of Health shows that about 13.6% of children ages 3 to 17 in Florida have been diagnosed with either ADD or ADHD. That's 3.1% higher than the national average of 10.5%. 3.1% may sound like a small number, but that equates to over 130,000 additional children diagnosed just here in the state of Florida. Now, this cause is incredibly personal to me. Like so many others, my daughter and I went through a health journey that changed our lives. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Together, we learned how powerful food really is, not just for our bodies, but for our overall well-being. It was through that journey that we realized just how many people out there struggle the same issues that we did, wondering what is really in our food and how does it actually affect our bodies. That realization inspired me to take action, and that also led me to launch a nonprofit focused on creating healthier communities. We provide healthy groceries and fresh produce, and in fact, we only distribute foods that are free from synthetic dyes and other harmful ingredients that can cause harm to our neighbors. Now, as a state representative, I can help join Florida to join the rest of the country in taking control of our food supply. These dyes are in so many products beyond just candy, soda, and cereals. They are in sports drinks, yogurts, pickles, fruit snacks, and even salad dressings. Many have cartoon characters on their packaging to attract children, and yet most consumers have no idea these ingredients are in their food. In fact, when I speak about this bill, a common reaction is, wait, we don't already do this? Wow, I guess not. Thank you so much for this bill. Not to mention, countless parents have come to me with success stories of their children's behavior once these ingredients were moved from their diets. But here's what really strikes me. The same products we see here in the US stores are made with different ingredients in other countries. Other countries have either banned these ingredients or added warning labels to food packaging containing these ingredients. They have recognized the dangers and have chosen to protect their citizens. And now Florida, we have the opportunity to do the same. It's time that we take the health of Floridians seriously. We cannot afford to keep ignoring the truth about what is in our food. In fact, this bill is bigger than just putting labels on packages. It's about raising awareness, making our food system more transparent, and making sure that consumer protections and public health comes first. I'm hopeful that the manufacturers will join us and start replacing these harmful dyes with healthier alternatives. But if not, at least warn us that they're in their foods. I feel like this is a David versus Goliath bill. Many of my colleagues in the House have even been lobbied by these large manufacturers to oppose this bill. But I'm standing strong, and I want to thank my bipartisan colleagues who are standing with me to fight for Florida's health. Thank you, Senator Wright and Representative Gonzalez Pittman, along with Representative Campbell, Chamberlain, Cross, Rosenwald, Stark, Valdez, Weinberger, and Woodson for co-sponsoring this bill. Our main priority is that Floridians have the information that they need to stay informed and make choices, better choices for themselves and their families. The bottom line is, I helped my community with healthier food options that were free from dyes, and now I have the opportunity to affect and help all of Florida. Together, we can create healthier communities, create more transparency in our food supply, and fight for better health outcomes for our children and our families. We can put our health first because we deserve to. So, I have an action item for everyone. In order to help move this bill forward, please contact your state representatives and your state senators and tell them to vote yes on HB 641. requiring transparency on our food labels, creating more consumer protections, and most importantly, protect our children and our future. The time to act is now. Thank you so much. And now, I want to introduce our next speaker, Representative Lindsey from District 60.
Thank you, Representative Tendrich. I'm so appreciative of you bringing forward this great bill, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of HB 641 as well as a sponsor of HB 595 related to chemical additives in food. And let's just be real. It's time that we cleaned up our food system here in Florida. With the third largest population, we have the power to make our voices known and to better inform our customers so that everyone from our youngest Floridians up to our senior citizens is getting high quality, nutritious food so they can live their most productive and healthy lives. Making sure that consumers are warned of the danger of some of these synthetic dyes is the first step in cleaning up our food systems and making sure that we are not creating adverse health effects in our Floridians. We're starting to see leadership at the federal level, but we can't wait for the federal government to take all these steps. And that's why it's incumbent on us as the Florida legislature to start this process and enact some of these good bills. So I appreciate Representative Tendrich bringing us together and some of the speakers that you'll hear from. It's time that we clean up our food systems, make sure that Floridians have the best quality food in their schools and their grocery stores and on their kitchen tables. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to announce Dr. Anna Maria Temple, a pediatrician.
It's ready, guys. I gotta get my props all set up. They got bent in the plane. It's fine. We're good. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hi, my name is Dr. Anna Maria Temple, and I am a pediatrician. I practice holistic pediatrics and integrative medicine. I've been in practice for over 25 years and treated over thousands of patients with neurobehavioral issues, including ADHD and autism. Not only have I had this in my clinical practice, but my own son, my middle son, Jake, was plagued by ADHD and behavioral issues all through elementary school, to the extent where I was on a daily texting with his teachers all 6 years of elementary school. Because he was suffering so much, and he was frankly quite annoying and disturbed the peace of all those around him, we had to take action, and the action was not medication. We decided to change his food in 2007, which was not a popular move at that time. Because of the food changes that we made, he was able to overcome his many issues with his behaviors, also autoimmune issues like eczema. And now I'm happy to report that he is about to graduate from NC State and biomedical engineer at the top of his class. But enough about me. Let's talk about our American children. One of the things I hear all the time is, no big deal, you're a weird doctor always talking about food coloring. It's not that much, it's just a little bit. What's the big deal? The average American child eats about 200 milligrams of artificial food dyes per day. That is 20 Twizzlers per day. Each Twizzler is 10 milligrams. In clinical studies, they have shown that as little as 30 milligrams, or 3 Twizzlers, will trigger neurobehavioral issues, including ADHD in children. One more time, the average American child eats 200 milligrams of artificial food dyes in their diet. A lot of people say, that can't be. My child doesn't eat that many. Well, let me tell you what is on the sports field. Gatorade, 20 milligrams. Doritos, 20 milligrams. That's 40 milligrams after a 5-year-old plays soccer on the sports field for 45 minutes, where basically they just picked flowers. For breakfast, we feed them popular cereal because kids should have fun, because food is fun. There's nothing fun about ADHD. That's 34 milligrams per serving in Fruit Loops. Not to mention Pop-Tarts. By the way, my children used to eat all these foods. 20 milligrams. And the list goes on. And by the way, the food industry is not transparent in how many milligrams of artificial food dyes they have in their food. A Purdue University had to conduct a specific study looking at various foods, including salad dressings, crackers, sports drinks, and popular children's foods to identify how many milligrams of artificial food dyes are in the children's foods, because again, the food industry is not transparent. In 1950, the FDA said that 12 milligrams of added food dyes is safe for human consumption. That's one Twizzler. By 2012, it said, no, just kidding. It is okay if they have 5 times that at 68 milligrams per day, which is 7 Twizzlers. When we say human consumption, we don't take into account that children are not little adults. Children have different physiology than adults, and it's not just human consumption that can be broadly said to all the children. For example, I ask you, would you ever give your dose of ibuprofen to your 4-year-old? Of course you wouldn't, because it could destroy their kidneys. Would you give them your dose of Tylenol when they're 4 years old? Of course you wouldn't, because it would destroy their liver. However, we feel like we can play by different rules when it comes to the food industry. We have numerous data to show that the children are getting sicker by the day. In 1994, 1 in 8 children were sick. By 2015, 1 in 3. By 2022, 1 in 2. That means 50% of our children are sick with a chronic disease as of today, and that is not okay. And the CDC predicts over the next year, 100% of our children are going to be plagued by a chronic disease. Rates of ADHD, to be specific. In 1980s, 1 in 20 children suffered with ADHD. By the way, I'm 52 years old, and I don't recall anyone in my high school class or in my elementary school that was on ADD medicines. My children can tell stories upon stories of all the children that are on this medication. In 2025, so this year, 1 in 9 children have been diagnosed with ADHD. 2.5% of them are children less than 5 years old. This is not okay. The data in Europe is half. It's half. So in Europe, here we have 1 in 9. In Europe is 1 in 20 rates of ADHD in children. Our rates of mental health disorders, 1 in 5. The rates of suicide in teens is the highest it's ever been. The rates of anxiety in teenagers, it's the highest that it's ever been. And we say, it's genetics. Is it? A study done by the California Environmental Protection Agency looked at 25 studies that tried to look at artificial food dyes and children's neurobehavioral outcomes, including ADHD. They found 64% of the studies showed an association between those and abnormal behavior. Animal toxicology reports showed the same association. To be specific, they showed issues with memory, learning, changes in neurotransmitters, and microscopic changes in brain structure. Children are not small adults. They have different detoxification pathways that have not matured. The brain is continuously growing, and they cannot tolerate chemicals added to their little bodies. A lot of people also say, it's a big deal. We're just putting a label on a product. We're just changing a food color. That's not going to get rid of ADHD. No, it's not. But you know what? The Highway Safety Patrol had the same issue way back when. When they reduced the speed limit, they didn't get rid of all the motor vehicle accidents, but they made a dent. When they added seatbelts, which, by the way, was a giant brouhaha. I remember my grandfather still talking about how these are dumb, this is so unsafe, I need to be able to get out of the car whenever. Remember that? That didn't get rid of all motor vehicle accidents, but it made an impact. We paved our roads, we added car seats. All those things individually did not get rid of motor vehicle accidents. Together, small changes helped to make a dent in the death of our children and humans in the world. So I leave you with this. How many more children need to be medicated or drugged? How many more children have to be diagnosed with neurobehavioral issues? How many more children can't function in their classroom and in life before we make the food industry accountable for their role that they're playing in all of this? Thank you so much. I would like to introduce Todd Wagner, tech and media entrepreneur and co-founder of FoodFight USA. I know you want to.
No, not in front of everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I was born in the Midwest, but I'm now a Florida resident. I am an attorney by education and a technology and media entrepreneur and philanthropist as my business career. But most importantly, for today's purposes, I'm a concerned citizen, parent, and co-founder of FoodFightUSA.com, a nonprofit whose mission is in part to clean up America's tainted food supply that is making us sick. Look, we've got a health problem in this country. We have a crisis of chronic disease. 3 of every 4 U.S. adults are now either overweight or obese. Over 38 million Americans, and growing, have diabetes. Diabetes alone accounts for $500 billion a year of our national health budget that's estimated about nearly $5 trillion. The diabetes rates among American youth has doubled over the past decade. And let us not forget, type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. It's estimated now that 22% of all deaths worldwide can be attributed to ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. I think of UPFs as the straw that stirs the obesity, cancer, and diabetes drink. They subvert our metabolism. If you overlay a chart of obesity rates in this country from the 1980s with the proliferation of these chemicals also in the 1980s, it's almost a perfect match. And by the way, this first happened when Big Tobacco bought up food companies in the 80s. Remember also, this cocktail of synthetic, man-made ingredients are designed to be addictive. We don't even call them food when we talk about it. We call them addictive edible substances. It's not food. People are fed by the food industry that pays no attention to health and are healed by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. They are like ships passing in the night, yet need to be in lockstep. Our food is literally killing us. But it's a slow, tortured death that first robs you of your health. I'm sure you've heard the word health span. And then eventually shortens your lifespan, which is, by the way, shorter now than it's ever been in our history. It's not you, it's the food. At FoodFight USA, a key part of our mission is to get state and federal legislation passed to stop self-regulation by food companies and to empower consumers to make more informed food choices. These bills announced today would accomplish both of those things. Our broken system in the U.S. has allowed more than 10,000 and growing synthetic additives into our food supply. This has been made possible by food companies exploiting the GRAS loophole, which, by the way, has no equivalent anywhere else in the world. It has allowed, since the year 2000, approximately 99% of chemicals added into our food supply to be approved by industry insiders, not by federal regulators. The good news is just this week, the new Secretary of HHS directed the FDA to close the loophole, which would be a huge step to prevent new chemicals being put into our food supply without proper review. The burden of proof should be on the companies that make and use additives to demonstrate long-term safety, independent science, cumulative effects testing, to show that adding these thousands of synthetic novel molecules to our diet is not harmful, which, by the way, is exactly the burden of proof in Europe, Canada, and dozens of countries around the world. Independent scientists, not so here. Cumulative effects testing, not so here. Look, the drug industry has to prove safety and efficacy. It seems quite fair for this standard to be at least as high for food chemicals, since everyone has to eat. At least with prescription drugs, you can argue that side effects of some level are okay because you're helping an underlying health issue, which frankly is largely brought on by our food industry. In Europe, ingredients are already reformulated. There are only just over 400 chemicals approved in Europe versus the 10,000 here. Their obesity, diabetes, and cancer rates are drastically lower. Their healthcare costs are lower. UPFs are 70% of the average American's food diet. It's only 20 to 30% in Europe. We fought in California to get 4 known carcinogens out of the food supply. I'm happy to report that 18 months later, 2 of the 4, red dye 3 and brominated vegetable oil, have now been banned nationwide. California also banned 6 of these same synthetic dyes in today's Florida bill from school lunches in their state. So states do have power, and lots of it, to fight for change. We've got nearly 20 states now that have introduced food safety bills from both sides of the aisle. I'm proud to fight for front-of-package warning labels for these synthetic dyes here in Florida. We need to stop having our population be real-life guinea pigs, as they currently are. Guess what? The largest meta-study in history over the last 50 years has taken place, and the results are in. It's not you, it's the food. This epidemic is worse. It's worse than big tobacco because at its peak, 42% of Americans smoked, but 100% of Americans have to eat. This is a first step in a very long fight to get the worst offenders either off the streets or put front-of-package warning labels similar to cigarettes, so at least consumers are making more informed choices. We have to start somewhere in Florida. Let's put a stake in the ground. I'm excited this conversation is now happening openly and publicly. 50 years ago, no one knew. But now we know, and they know, and we need to pivot to a better way. By the way, front-of-package warning labels are already in place in countries around the world with very positive health impacts, along with reformulated ingredients for these synthetic dyes, already in place in countries around the world. So make no mistake, this is not to lead the way worldwide. This is merely to start catching up. We are way down the charts in food safety. The food companies are already doing it now. They just don't do it here. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican or Democratic issue. It is a health issue. And our children and our adult citizens deserve it. At FoodFight USA, we applaud the Florida legislators fighting to protect Florida's children and clean up our tainted food supply. And one last thing, please go to foodfightusa.com/Florida to sign a letter of support for this legislation. Thank you. And I will now introduce Vani, a well-known food activist and author, known as the Food Babe. She has led national efforts to increase transparency in food labeling and advocate for the removal of harmful additives from the food supply. Vani.
Thank you. Wow, it's great to be here in Florida. Florida is near and dear to my heart. It's where I came every summer to visit my grandmother. You know, I grew up with 2 immigrant Indian parents, and when they came here to the United States, they were very trusting of the American food supply, and they wanted me and my brother to eat like Americans. And so one of the first things my dad introduced my mom to was a McDonald's hamburger, and is like, you know, here, if we're going to be in America, we are going to eat like Americans. And that's how I grew up, on processed foods. But as a result, I had just about every health issue under the sun, or at least it felt like it at the time. And when I went to the doctor's offices, they never asked me what I was eating. And it wasn't until my early 20s where I hit rock bottom that I started to look at the food that I was eating, and I couldn't believe what had been done to it. The amount of chemicals that have been added into our food in the last 50 years is not only shocking, but it's downright criminal. Over the last 50 years, there's been countless additives added to our food supply, over 10,000, as Todd just mentioned. And those additives are not to improve our health. They're not there for a nutritional purpose. They're actually there to improve the bottom line of the food industry. And the worst part, the food additives that we're talking about today are aesthetic. Therefore, a reason to make someone more drawn to that food, to buy that food, to eat more of that food. When a focus group was conducted for cereals, when Trix was trying to remove artificial food dyes several years ago, the kids were gravitated towards the brighter colors and they ate more of that product. When we look at the statistics of today, when 38% of preteens are pre-diabetic, when it used to be 0, it's downright criminal what's been done to our food supply. When we look at the statistics that 7 million children are being diagnosed with ADHD, and in Florida, 65% of those that are diagnosed are on some type of medication, it's criminal. And this is the time where we have to expose what's been done to the food industry and hold them accountable. And I'm so excited to be here today to support this bill, because when I went through my health journey, one of the first things I removed from my diet was artificial food dyes. I used to have eczema all over my face, my skin, every crease of my body. I had asthma. All of a sudden, when I removed artificial food dyes from my diet, that disappeared. I went off my 3 medications just to control those ailments. I want to see that for other children. I want to see that for other Americans. And when I started to research what had been done to our food supply, I started to compare American products to the same products they sell in other countries. And there were startling differences. I brought some examples here today. Doritos in the US contain red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. In Australia, they don't. The Indian version of Fruit Loops, as well as the Canadian, Australian, European version of Fruit Loops, don't contain red 40, yellow 5, blue 1, yellow 6, but they use beetroot and paprika extract and other vegetable juices and fruit juices to color their Fruit Loops. Fanta, here in the United States, has yellow number 6 and red 40, but in the UK, they're using real orange juice concentrate. In the US version of Skittles, there's 10 different artificial food dyes, including titanium dioxide that was just banned in Europe because it causes DNA damage. Gatorade, here in the United States, has red 40 and caramel color level 4 linked to cancer. In Germany, it doesn't. It's using carrot and blackberry and sweet potato juice. Easter's coming up. We've got Cadbury cream eggs here. In the US version, yellow number 6. But in the UK version, we've got no dyes. These food companies have already reformulated their products for so many other countries, and you have to ask why. It's because they required warning labels on their products, and these food companies did not want to put these warning labels on their products, so they reformulated them, some of them in less than a year. Can you imagine the impact that a warning label on a product that contains artificial food dyes and titanium dioxide would have in the state of Florida? You would inspire the entire industry to remove artificial food dyes, just like they did in all of these other countries. You have an historic moment in history to be the leader in getting the fastest change possible in the food system today. We have the rising up, the bubbling up of grassroots movements happening across the country in these 20+ states that are looking at legislation on this issue. But together, if all the states do this work, we can demand that the food industry move very fast on this so we can protect the children of America altogether. Thank you so much.
I want to thank everyone for coming, but I do want to, before we close, just let you know, one of the biggest arguments that I've heard from the lobbyists opposing this bill is that that the food dyes are customer preference. And I just want to say a quick story. Through my nonprofit, I worked with a youth organization, and I brought a healthy buffet for them on request from the director. None of the kids would touch it. I asked, can I do an 8-week program and then bring the same exact buffet to them? I worked with them for 8 weeks and slowly introduced those foods to them, and 8 weeks later, they devoured that same exact identical spread. So how are we going to know if it's our customer preference if we haven't had an option to choose? I would like to also bring up an incident that actually happened in Palm Beach County at Dreyfus, which is a school in Palm Beach County. A student there was given gum from the teacher, part of a curriculum science experiment. The gum had little tiny specks of red that were so tiny and really not obvious. And who reads labels on a pack of gum? This student went into anaphylactic shock because she chewed that piece of gum. And a warning label on there would have also potentially stopped that from happening because the allergy was in her student file and it was a known allergen. Kids are really being hurt by this. They're being over-medicated for this, and we need to step forward, which is why I just want to thank everyone for showing up. I want to thank Representative Lindsey Cross, and we had been joined by Senator Jonathan Martin. Thank you so much for coming. He also has, in collaboration with Representative Cross, another food bill. He's sponsoring Senate Bill 560. Is that it? And so, I'm sorry? 656. And so as you can see, there's multiple members in this legislature that are trying to take control of our Floridians' health. Please contact your state representatives. Please contact your state senators and tell them to vote up on House Bill 641 and make sure that we do take control of our food supply in the state of Florida. Thank you. Oh, we can take questions if anyone has any.
What's your response to some critics claiming that this should be a federal issue, particularly because it can affect small businesses trying to ship between states?
Sure. Well, if you look at what's happening across the country right now, there's policy passing in every state. We've had an opportunity for years to take this into the federal matter, into the federal administration's hands, and unfortunately, it's taken to the point where we've had to take it on a state level. We do have a great push, and we have momentum now. We have a few options where we pass this bill, and we actually take control right now. We don't know how long this would take. But our bill is not doing a full-out ban. This bill is actually requiring warning labels to create transparency. And we're also, what I'm hoping to see is that we see 30-plus states taking policy right now. If every state actually does enact their policy, we're going to have to create a countrywide, a nationwide change with the food industry. And this would actually push us in the right direction a lot faster and protect the entire United States of America children and their families. Oh, yes, please.
Is that okay?
Here, come stand by the mic.
Let me just make a comment about the FDA. So the FDA, that anybody's been exposed to it for any length of time, the running joke was always the F was silent. The FDA has not cared about food for a very long time. We can surmise as to why, but it always was kind of the forgotten, the orphan child, the stepchild, whatever you want to call it. They even office in a different part of DC. And so they've never had the culture or caring to make a change like you're describing to do it. So that means the states have to step forward, and they have to create this change because it will bring everyone to the table. And I think that's part of what has to happen. I have my own theories, right? FDAs have typically been run by medical doctors. They would be the first to admit they are taught, how to use medications. They're taught certain surgeries, but maybe not always nutrition. There's exceptions now, it's changing. But that has, I think, driven a lot of the policy there where there just wasn't a reason for them to do anything about it.
And also, the state of Florida does have a history of creating food policies specific to the state of Florida. Last year, we passed the cultivated meat bill, and we also passed a hemp bill. It was vetoed, but we actually passed in the state legislature that we were going to change packaging for hemp products. So we have, in the past, showed precedents of creating specific packaging and food requirements in the state of Florida.
One of the concerns for that hemp bill that included the burden for small businesses, the financial burden for that. Do you share that concern for this? I understand it's very important to get kind of relief, but as far as businesses, I'm worried about that.
Well, the way that this bill is actually designed, the responsibility is on the manufacturers. So this is designed to actually specifically protect the small businesses from being harmed in this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there's no more questions, we will conclude this press conference.